It's just a joke, Mom. It's just a joke, Mom. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audiophiles. My name's John. His name's Andy. I'm either half of half and half, or I'm either half that's whole. I've got to be one with all my halves. It's my worthy earthly goal. It's my worthy earthly goal. It's my worthy earthly goal. More on that later. But first, a track to listen to, selected by Comrade Andy.
Mm-hmm.
What have you got for us today?
I've got, and this is one of the more sort of serendipitous moments from my perspective on the channel was the day I put this track on our list. We got a message on a comment from one of our regular listeners. I believe it was Terry Sutton, but don't hold me to it. I'm mistaken. Apologies. But they said, oh man, why don't you guys dig into some Pere Ubu? They haven't made an appearance on the channel yet. And I was like, I literally just got done entering this into our spreadsheet for songs to do for this month. So, we're going to be listening to some Pere Ubu. Now, from what I understand, you are familiar with some, but not all of their works, as I recall. So I think I've chosen wisely by picking a track off of, I believe it's the closing track off of their first full-length album, and the track is called Humor Me. You know that at all? Okay, cool.
No,
cool.
Pere Ubu has been mentioned to me a couple of times over the years, and I think I picked unwisely. I just grabbed an album, downloaded it, listened to it, thought it was shoddy at best.
Okay.
But I think it was one of their later ones. It was Why I Hate Women.
Yeah.
And it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. It didn't land. You know, it was like full of ideas, but it seemed like they were just scratching around.
Yeah.
It didn't really work for me.
I think that's one of the sort of, I don't know if it's part of their charm or if it's their handicap. But one of the things about Pere Ubu, at least from some things that I've extrapolated from conversations with people and reading, and just my overall experience, is that some of it is seemingly genius, and then there's other songs of it where it's just like, I saw what you were trying to do, or I know what you were trying to do, but it just didn't land. But that is the mark of someone who wants to experiment, or a band who wants to experiment with their music. So you'll have this with their stuff for sure. But I'm hoping I picked one that you can enjoy perhaps a bit more than you did off that latter album, the stuff off that latter album you listened to. So go off, humor me, if you will, and give this track a listen. And
don't I always?
Yes, you're quite the trooper. And come back and let me know what you think of it, man.
Will do. Sort of show you that bass guitar kind of made me think of like Eastern European folk music for a second. I don't know what that synth line coming in is. It kind of sounds like someone bowing a saw. But anyway, a cool start and strange mental image. So let's start again. Short song. We've got plenty of time to mess around.
It was the first thing that I saw. I never see that kind of classical girl. I understand that it was the first thing that I saw. That was fate. It was a ballistics man. That was fate. It was a word, what a word, what a word, what a big word.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I really enjoyed this actually. The Pere Ubu I heard didn't really land as ideas, but it seemed to like whenever they come to something where he would just put on a silly voice and stuff I heard didn't really land at all. This is landing. This is cool. Um, it's got that really good rhythm section. There's that sort of classic beat of that time, and then his ponderings over the top. It has an element of the sort of existentialism about it, almost absurdist. It sort of puts me in mind of a Samuel Beckett scenario. I like the way he says, "It's just a joke, Mon." The synth line is quite insane. It almost feels like mental meandering. And it feels like, I'm sure it isn't, but it sounds like it's been played with like a pen, like a stylophone, going all over the place. And that's really cool. And it's almost like buzzing in your head. Yeah, this feels like he's not coping with stuff. And the easiest thing to say is just a joke, man. Yeah, really interesting. I was always told that early Pere Ubu was like lumped in with punk, and this is not punk at all. It's not really even post-punk. Um, it's you can see it's kind of that era, but it's not that sound. A bit like sort of Modern Lovers wasn't either. Um, yeah, it's really cool. I'm enjoying this. I'm just going to bring it back to when he does his funny voices again. I think my rambling's going to take longer than the song, actually. I'll try and shut up.
What a big world, what a world to be drowned in. It's just a joke, man.
And claps.
It's just a joke, man. It's just a joke, man.
That drumming's nice. And the bass.
Another day will suffer, and that's the way of the West. Suffer.
Sorry, but the way it came in there, another day. That's really David Byrne like. I guess they can be independent, doesn't have to influence each other, but that's just reminding me of David Byrne there, that sort of insistent, paranoid sounding. Yeah, like someone that would stop you, if you're waiting for a bus and they'll have to tell you what's wrong with his world rather than the world. It's one of those voices, which I like. I like David Byrne. It's cool. Yeah, it's cool.
It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. Goodbye.
No, it said 2:45. I read 2:45, but 2:45 is too short. I really, really enjoyed that. Uh, yeah, the rhythm section was superb. Some of that drumming was really the way it's sort of shuffling and skipping beats. Bass where was doing bass was doing some great work in there. Um, the singer was full of character and charm, I thought, in a sort of unhealthy way. I could see how some people would find his delivery, perhaps, I don't know, pretentious. I've not got a problem with it. Yeah, you got sort of this weird, I have to say, American, um, weird emphasis of singing on certain bands of that period, sort of 78, 79 through to about 82. Um, I always used to find it fairly charming, to be honest with you. But yeah, he's also, you do feel that something's not quite right with him. And we may find him one day, you know, on the back of a bus stop or a loading bay of a shop or something, just stiff with the frost. Yeah, I don't think it'll end well for someone like that. But yeah, the way it went towards the end with the guitar solo was really nice because it started off almost like a classic sort of uh, 1970s guitar solo, and then it went into those reverby chordy like, and then it went into that sort of angular sound. Ow, really sounded nice, that did. And the way it sort of tangled up with the synth that was going off, doing whatever, almost like started sounding almost like a theremin the way it was going. Um, and he's going, it's just a joke, humor me, humor me. It's all had this idea of mental entanglement, um, which, if that's what I wanted to portray, it came across really well. I could see this being described as sort of art rock, or I mean, I've heard people call it avant-garde. I don't think it's avant-garde at all. I just think it's really, really good, and I really enjoyed it. I want to hear lots more. Um, this version of Pere Ubu. So we better get the skinny on this, and let's go back and chop it up with Andy.
All right, welcome back. I'm glad to see you've returned in one piece. That was a short little number for you. So you weren't gone for too long. What did you make of it, man?
Yeah, I barely time to fall asleep. Yeah, it's funny. It started off, and I had to stop and go back because it's really weird. Sometimes you just get an impression straight away. And I had an overall impression of what I thought this was going to be, and it wasn't 1,000 miles away. But the first opening 3-5 seconds, when the bass comes in and a little bit of guitar, immediately there's thought sprung to my head, Eastern European folk music. And I don't know why, but it did. So I had to reset mentally and then go again. And then we get this synth line that joins that initially again reminded me of someone bowing a saw. And We Are Detective and the wonderful film Delicatessen. If you haven't seen it, my God, you're missing out. But anyway, clear the mind of all of that rubbish. So in come the drums with some really interesting kicks, and then the bass, and that we already had, and the rhythm section settles into this steady, quite funky beat with a clipped guitar, and the bass is really taking point at this stage, leading the way. And it's not an uncommon sound for that period, that sort of overall sort of groove. I will say this, I'll sort of go through it, but you can take it as read from me that throughout, the bass was awesome, and the drums, as Bill and Ted would say, would be most awesome. Really, really good. Both of them really good, and interesting as well. And not showing off either, but just
Right.
the little kicks that the drummer was doing, and the sort of syncopated off beats and then on again, and the very unshowy sort of runs that the bass would do. Not even runs, but you know what I mean. Just little triplets or whatever, little bits they were doing.
Mhm.
All was just really, really well done. Anyway, your man starts singing. And I did get some words at various points when I wasn't laughing. He says it was the first thing I saw. Never see that kind of classical girl. And it just made me think of Classic Girl by James Addiction. I don't know why, but you know. Don't know if that has something to do with them naming that song. And then he says something like, that was fate. And then there's like, I think it's the only point in the song, it's like a double tracked, double vocaled line. And because of that, I've really found it hard to make out what he was saying. But then he goes into, I think he says it was word, what a word, what a word. But he definitely says the last bit, what a big world. So it might have been world or word, but anyway. But he's changing his character as he's singing this. What a word, what a word.
Yeah.
You know, and he really amps it up at this point. And I will get into that later, but all the while, again, I'm going to keep repeating myself here. The drums keep things really interesting. They become almost militaristic at points with his fills, you know. And the synth meanders, and it sounds like almost like a stylophone, you know, when they play it with a pen.
Mhm.
And I just imagine this keyboard player is just doodling all over the map. I mean, I don't know if his arm's gone to sleep or something, but you know, it's just a completely unbridled meanderings. Again, I'll get into that later. And then he comes back with, and I'm not getting all the lines here, so there's bits in between, but it's just a joke, Mon, which made me laugh so much the way he says Mon instead of
Yeah.
man. That's so funny. It's just a joke, Mon. It's just a joke, Mon. Really, yeah, I'll get to the end and I'll talk about what I think about it. So now we get accompanied by hand claps in triplets, no less.
They show it
Again,
all.
I have to mention this point, the drum and the bass, fucking brilliant. And then he goes, another day. And the way he comes in with that line, another day, is the most David Byrne of the whole song. But it's that touch of I call it insistent paranoia ramblings. It's like somebody, when you're waiting for public transport, there's always somebody compelled to speak to you about what's wrong with their world, not the world, but
Mhm.
their own world and their own troubles, and they just can't help but tell you. And it's that tone of voice. God bless him, you know. He says something about, well, suffer, that's the way of, I think, the West, suffer. And then, oh, it's a joke. A couple of times. And then we go into the guitar solo, which is fantastic. Now, it's not face melting guitar solo or anything like that, but it's really interesting because it starts off this almost classic 70s rock guitar solo, but then it morphs into a coat of many notes. You know, this sort of, you know, arpeggiated sort of, you know, really nice and full. It's not quite jangling guitar that we get, you know, a few years from then, but you know, you can see it's there, and it's not birds either, but it's in between. And then it changes again to this angular sound that to me sounds like bending metals, and it's really sort of great sound to it. And it's a sound which becomes truly plentiful in the post-punk genre, because I'm thinking this is late 70s, 78, 77, 79. I know they started around then. It's just, and then they get lumped in with punk. So by 81, 82, that sound is manifest everywhere. But they're doing it then, which is great. Again, he announces it's a joke, and then he sort of humor me, and the singer wails the last lines into the darkness, and then it ends. Although there was a lot going on, and I noted the time when I stopped and reminded it still felt like a very short 2:45. Then with the breaks back then, I guess a lot of the time they were pushing against, you know, the proggy nonsense of ramblings that were, you know, 15-minute Emerson, Lake and Palmers and all that shit. But I blame the Ramones. But I could have handled another couple of minutes easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
Me too.
And the nature of that song is such that he could have jammed on quite easily. They could have done something else, just carried it on, he could have done some more proclamations about, his tax returns or something, and it was still been interesting. So to kind of sum up, I can't emphasize this enough. Superb rhythm section, drums in particular really stole my heart. But really good. I have heard them say that early Pere Ubu sort of being lumped in with punk, but this definitely wasn't punk at all. Um, I don't think it's really even post-punk, I guess at the time they might have called it avant-garde, but it's funny how things don't seem avant-garde when you look back on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe art rock is probably a better description of this. I think, and I said in the reaction, I think his vocal stylings could come across as almost pretentious. And there were, in that period, that sort of 70, probably led by Mr. Byrne himself, but from about 77 through to about 82, there was a lot of Devo, you think of them as well, where they stylized vocals.
Yeah.
Which I think if you had it in a Cockney or a Leeds accent or whatever in this country, you wouldn't think twice. But because it's an American accent, you think, are these guys being wankers? I'm not sure. But for me, I didn't mind it. I never, and I actually warmed to his character. The delivery and the lyrics as such of what I caught had a kind of a rambling, absurdist feel to them with that minimalistic touch. It kind of put me in mind of Samuel Beckett, really. Overall, though, it had a feeling of like existential angst with this synth line. I mean, it's almost like a buzzing in your head, but I think it replicates the sort of mental wanderings of the narrator, because it's just going off and they found him at the bottom of the garden again. Come on, this way. And the way it intertwined with the guitar, it again had that feeling of an unsure footing and like entanglement of thought. And the way he's like pronouncing, it's almost like he's fighting with his own mind as to what he's going to say or come out. So I find it really interesting and fascinating. I'm sure I don't know what the intention was, but that's what it said to me. I did say in the reaction that you do worry for his outcome, whether his body may be discovered around the back of a shop half frozen one morning, amongst all the trash bags and everything. It's that sort of character.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this, and I'm very eager to hear more because this was superb.
Awesome. Yeah. The album Modern Dance is one of the most sort of, for as niche as it is, it's so influential to a lot of the genres that we discuss on the day-to-day here on the channel, even off channel. So I hope I'm right in this. To Terry's point, it's been a long time coming. We probably should have done some Pere Ubu earlier. And that, as the American, I'll wear that one. That's on me probably. But yeah, they're a fabulous band. Really interesting. It's funny how you mentioned about like you wonder about the lead singer and like when are we going to hear some off of? He's the mainstay. Like the band is still around now, and he's the one constant, which is funny
right.
because you're right. He seems like volatile and mercurial, and what is up with this guy? But yeah, he's the one through line for this act to this day. So Pere Ubu, they're an American rock group formed in Cleveland, Ohio in 1975. Now, I say Cleveland, I say 1975. It's funny that you mentioned Devo because I think they are from the same area. They're that Midwestern, new wavy kind of post-punk sound, and they were contemporaries of Pere Ubu. So interesting observation that you would make given the circumstances. The band had a variety of long-term and reoccurring band members, with singer David Thomas being the one only member staying throughout the band's lifetime. The band's the name of the band is actually a reference to Ubu, an avant-garde play by French writer Alfred Jarry. So I guess they sort of took this absurdist avant-garde kind of piece of art to influence their own name, which is an interesting choice, and I think it's pretty apropos. They released their debut album on which this track is featured, The Modern Dance, in 1978, and followed with several more LPs before disbanding in 1982. Now, I think it's important to note that they had released a couple singles leading up to the Modern Dance. So this wasn't their official first release, though it was their first full-length album. So the Thomas, they disbanded in 1982 and then were formed 5 years later in 87. Again, a different cast of characters for the most part. Continue to record and tour. In total, they've released 19 studio albums, as well as myriad other, forms of music. And the band has seen much turnover throughout the years, but the lineup on this album includes David Thomas on vocals, musette, percussion, and production, Tom Herman on guitar, backing vocals, and production, Alan Ravenstein on the EML 101 and 200 analog synthesizers, saxophone, tapes, and production, Tony Maimon on bass, piano, backing vocals, and production, and Scott Krause on drums and production. So describing their sound as avant-garage, Pere Ubu's work drew inspiration from sources such as musique concrète, 60s rock, performance arts, and industrial environments of the American Midwest. So it's interesting, you had talked about grinding like the sound of like grinding or bending metal. Weird sounds like that are industrial in nature, and the Midwest, the Rust Belt, as we now call it, was kind of the hub of all of that. Sort of like what I would assume y'all's Birmingham might have been like. I don't know, but I've always associated sort of industrialism with the smokestacks and all that stuff of Birmingham post World War I, obviously planted in my head through not only history classes but Peaky Blinders. But yeah, sort of that kind of atmosphere was the Midwest, car country and all that kind of stuff. Their music has been called art punk and post-punk. Their songs imagined 1950s and 1960s garage rock and surf music archetypes, as seen in a distorted funhouse mirror, emphasizing the music's angst, loneliness, and lyrical paranoia, which I think you kind of picked up on in Mr. Thomas's delivery. Yes, sometimes sounding like a demented nursery rhyme sing-along, this already bizarre blend was overlaid with Ravenstein's ominous EML synthesizer effects and tape-looped sounds, and of mundane conversation, ringing telephones, or steam whistles. Their propulsive rhythmic pulse, as you were keen to note, was similar to krautrock, but Thomas's yelping, howling, desperate singing was still was and still is peculiar when compared to most of the other rock and roll singers, not only of the time but that we still hear today. I would say that the closest comparison is David Byrne of Talking Heads for sure, just because of the sort of the mental state or attitudinal inflection that he puts on his words. It's so odd but it's somehow compelling, at least for me anyway. I can see how other people might be like, oh my god, this is a bit over the top. While the band achieved a little commercial success, they have exerted wide influence on subsequent underground music scenes. Reviewing for The Village Voice in 1978, Robert Christgau wrote that even though there's too much Radio Ethiopia and not enough Redonda Beach, he would be listening through the failed stuff. The highs are worth it. In Christgau's record guide, Rock Albums of the 70s, which was released some years later in 1981, he reaffirmed that the highs are worth it and the failed stuff actually ain't bad in his revised review of the album. Ken Tucker, writing for Rolling Stone, that also just sounds to me like someone covering their ass, not realizing how influential the shit that they were originally covering would become, and then kind of going back and do some revisionist critiquing.
Yeah.
We see you, Chris.
Actually, the Velvet Underground weren't too bad.
Yeah, exactly. One of those numbers. So Ken Tucker, writing in Rolling Stone, called it vivid and exhilarating, even if harsh and willfully ugly. NME named The Modern Dance the 11th best album of 1978. Fact placed the record at number 31 on its list of the 100 best albums of the 1970s. Mojo and Rolling Stone Album Guide rated it a 4 out of 5 star, while AllMusic awarded the album a 4.5 stars, and the following entities awarded it a perfect score: the Encyclopedia of Popular Music, the Independent, the New Musical Express, Record Mirror, Spin Alternative Record Guide, and Uncut. Quite a list of all people saying, wow, amazing shit. Malcolm Dome of Louder Sound wrote of the album, the modern dance was unlike anything at the time. Dark, manic, repressive. It opens with almost unbearable feedback before lacerating with non-alignment pact, one of its tracks, immediately putting the listener on the back foot. And the oral assault never ceases, with a quite terrifying humor me and the contorted Chinese radiation, especially ahead of their time. Hugh Baines of Guitar.com wrote of this track in his review of the album. The closer, Humor Me, was written for Peter Loeffner and runs the gauntlet of Herman's talents, with dub riffage replaced by patient solo and uber melodic lead lines as Ravenstein ramps up the weirdness. Now, I alluded to Peter Loeffner for the first time, so probably some context would be good here. Loeffner was a founding band member along with David Thomas, was featured as the guitarist on the two singles that they released before this full-length album. He is a wildly talented and influential musician, I should say was, because 2 years after leaving the band in 1977, he would succumb to pancreatitis, just failure of the pancreas. That was probably in part because of his rampant drug use and alcoholism. The guy was definitely mired in some issues, as the endless list of these kind of talented people are, you know what I mean? So I think this was the band, sort of the last track on the album, sort of a doff of the cap to their buddy and former bandmate. So the lyrics, oh, it was the first thing that I saw. Oh, you never see that kind of classical girl. Understand that it was the first thing that I saw. That was fate. It was the ballistics, man. That was fate. It was a world. What a world. What a world. What a big world. What a world to be drowned in. It's just a joke, man. It's just a joke, man. It's just a joke, man. Another day? Well, suffer, for that's the way of the West. Suffer. Oh, it's a joke. Oh, it's a joke. Oh, it's a joke. It's a joke. Oh, it's a joke? Oh, that's a joke? Huh. Well, then humor me. Well, then humor me. Well, then humor me. And those are the lyrics. And I should say, go ahead.
It's like Waiting for Godot, isn't it? It really
Yeah. It is. It's stream of consciousness, a consciousness that you have no insight into the volatility of or the soundness of. It's really interesting stuff. And yet, it's still like clever. The parts that I can make sense of, I don't know why he says man instead of man, but like, suffering is the way of the West. Like this idea of like conformity for a guy like Loeffner and these guys who are not going to conform. They weren't cut from that cloth. They're not meant for the 9-to-5 life that they probably, 9-to-5, you're talking overtime, all these unionists and steel workers and car builders and machinists. That's not who they are. But so I just think it's funny that they're kind of, I don't know, coming at music in this kind of absurdist sort of way. But with good intent. So Michael Little of the Vinyl District would write in his review, Humor Me was Thomas talking over one deranged synth riff and drum. He goes on in this vein until he cries, it's a joke, man. It's just a joke, man. It's just a joke, man. Then some hand claps come in, followed by an excellent and wiry guitar solo, and Thomas, sounding certifiably Looney Tunes, cries, humor me, over and over. On this one, his singing reminds me of David Byrne, tormented, paranoid, and insistent. He would continue. Humor me is a cry of contempt for that cruel and stupid universe, which isn't very funny at all. Life's idea of a punchline is a joke followed by a fist, and David Thomas wants nothing to do with it. It makes perfect sense that Jerry's Ubu should open with the word merde. The word may be shit, or the world may, actually it's funny, the word is shit in French. The world may be shit, but Thomas has refused to budge an inch in the face of its shittiness. No, he's too busy turning his life into a poem of incoherence and absurdity, and we're all better off for it. I think that last bit is hilarious, charming, and again, apropos to the character he's talking about, Mr. Thomas. Yeah, interesting stuff. You could tell just by this. that it makes perfect sense that some of their stuff would ring genius with you, and other stuff would be like, that's a bridge too far. What the hell are you doing? But that's what you get when you roll the dice when you put on a record by Pere Ubu. It's just, you know, how they are. So thanks for giving this a listen, man. I really love this track. It's kind of weird. I'm usually the one pulling stuff out of, like, you know, somewhere in the middle-ish, maybe early 90s up until now. You're the guy that's pulling shit out of the late 70s hat. So in a weird, you know, role reversal, here we find ourselves reviewing Pere Ubu and listening to their track. So thanks a lot for giving this one a go.
No, I really, really enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, maybe in the future we can, with 19 albums, right, and you only having one and listen to just a track off this intro, there's plenty for me to pick from. So there may be some more Pere Ubu in the future, this eclectic bunch from Cleveland, Ohio. Guys out there in the listening audience, let us know what you thought of Pere Ubu. If there's other stuff that we should be checking out by them, if other stuff off the Modern Dance is worthy of giving a go, I know it is, or any of their subsequent 18 albums or whatever, just give it a shout in the comments field. We love interacting with you guys and seeing you interact with each other. Also, while we have your attention, please think about liking, sharing, and or subscribing, helping us boost the channel's you know, presence on YouTube so other people can join the mix here, learning new songs and offering new songs. We love checking out new good music. And hopefully John and I will see all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audiophiles. We'll see you later, guys.